Hi everyone, this is Ashley from Comfort Keepers in Chicago. Today I'm going to be walking you through a few steps on how to have a meaningful conversation with a person who has early to mid-stage dementia or Alzheimer's. So one of the first things you want to do if you're having a conversation with, let's say your grandmother or your mother and they're suffering from cognitive decline, it would be to focus on your body language and your tone. So kind of what I'm doing right now, you can see that I'm leaning my head. I have an open stance, and my tone is nice and calm, very even. So as you're going through a conversation, you want to make sure you're leaning in, you're showing that you're interested and you're engaged. It's also very important to not rush the conversation. So the techniques we're going to cover today are not about essential things, activities of daily living, for example. So I wouldn't recommend using all these techniques if you're trying to get out of the door as quickly as possible to go to a doctor's appointment. Some of them might apply, like the body language, for example, but others, such as using open-ended questions, really aren't going to apply in this case. Okay, so to get us started, let's first think about having an open posture, a nice even tone. The next thing you want to do is to keep in mind that a conversation where you're really just trying to connect with that loved one, it's not about a result. So on your end, you can, maybe feel like I want to learn about my mom's high school days, or I want to figure out where she's keeping a certain record. That's not really having an objective like that won't help you in having a meaningful conversation. The best thing you can do is to go in with a clear and open heart and be willing to learn and embrace whatever comes up. So now we know have open body language, clear even tone, and then go in with no expectations of what's going to come out of it. Okay, so the third thing is that you can use objects and the environment to engage the person. So let's say you're in your mother's home and on the wall, there's here I have a picture right here. Got a little Picasso sketch. So let's say that you saw this hanging on the wall, and maybe you grew up your whole life with this sitting there, and it doesn't really mean anything to you anymore. That doesn't mean you can't still have a conversation and learn new things about it. A person suffering from mid-stage dementia or Alzheimer's is usually capable of going back in time and remembering their past. So they might have a very accurate understanding of when they bought the painting or who made it or why it's significant. They might be able to do all of that even without knowing what they had for lunch. So if I wanted to have a conversation about a picture like this, you can start with something really simple, like, that's a really beautiful sketch there. Is that, that looks like it's an owl. Is it an owl? And, so just starting with something that shows genuine curiosity for something that clearly is meaningful to the client because it's hanging on their wall. It's very likely to have some sort of significance to them. And then also having an inviting question. So you're giving them a little bit of information. Oh, that looks like it might be an owl. Tell me a little bit more about that. So that's one way to get them to open up. Using the environment. Compliments usually work well too. So you can say, I love your couch. Have you had this couch, it looks like you may have had this couch for a little while. When did you get it? I know it's kind of a tricky thing to begin because certain questions are not going to be received well, so it's a matter of thinking about how you can structure these open-ended questions to get the most out of them. One thing that we found to be really helpful here at Comfort Keepers is the game called Table Topics, and I have the family edition here, and I highly recommend making sure that you pick out ones that are a little more lighthearted, like the family version here. And one thing we actually do in training is I have all of the caregivers go through and pick out a card, and we sit around as a group and talk about whatever card is pulled. So this one says, what is your proudest accomplishment? And having somebody imposing this question, you're going to invite a longer conversation. Um, it might take a moment. The person you're talking to may not have like an instant, like, I'm proud of this poetry contest I won in high school. They may not have that ready to go, but it could trigger something. Okay, so let's see what another one is. So they have another question here. Would you rather always lose or never play? So this one isn't even about something in the past. It's about getting the individual to have to think about their integrity and their personality and respond right now. This is a really great question. So if you were to ask me, would you rather always lose or never play? I would say, I think a lot of people would say, I'd rather always lose. And I think I'd rather always lose because there's so much to gain from that. Every time you lose, you have a new story, a new experience, and something to pull from. And I'm sure it's going to be a real bummer to lose, but in the end, you have a fulfilling life experience. You know that you've showed up and you did the best that you could, and that's certainly better than not knowing if you would succeed because you didn't try. So that's my response, and now you know a little bit about me. I highly recommend games like this, or even just coming up with questions on your own. It can be anything silly like, what's your favorite food, or do you prefer pizza or ice cream? It doesn't have to be a big, weighty question. The really cool thing is that as you pose these questions, it opens up an umbrella of other possible topics. So, the first one we had, what's your proudest accomplishment? As soon as a person shares that, then there's more room to learn about where they were at that time in their life. So let's say a client or your mom or whoever says, my proudest moment was watching my daughter become elected on city council. That was her lifetime dream, and I worked with her my entire life to get her to feel empowered and to get her to feel capable of running for office. And when she was elected to city government, I felt amazing. And so from there, you know that she's a proud mom, that you know that she cares about her child's success and that her daughter is involved in politics. And there's a big, expansive area for you to pull from. You can now say, oh, what did you do with your daughter growing up? How did you help her and encourage her to get into government? What sort of things does she care about now? Were you involved in the campaign? And so on and so forth. That example just kind of popped into my mind. I would actually recommend staying away from anything political just for your own sake, because it can get a little tricky. Even if it is a loved one, and sometimes especially if it's a loved one, you want to stay away from, I think the word is divisive topics like that. Okay, so highly recommend table topics. That's a great starting place, especially if you're a little bit like me. I'm more on the shy side. I love to listen to people, but I don't always know what kind of questions to ask to get them to open up. So that's a great starting place. Another really important thing to remember as you're talking to a person who has dementia or Alzheimer's is to go with the flow. It's not about what's right or wrong. It's not about them remembering you or your childhood. And that's going to be one of the hardest things, is letting go of the past that you own and embracing their experience right now. I know that I experienced this firsthand with my great grandmother. She went through the full cycle of having Alzheimer's and eventually passed away from it. But I would sit there and talk to her from the time I was a little kid, until she passed. And she would frequently confuse me with one of my aunts or different nurses that she worked with. She would frequently be confused as to who she was talking to. But that really wasn't the point of it. It didn't matter that she knew who I was. It mattered that she was having a fulfilling experience in being able to communicate and still exist as a human in space and time. I know that sounds very hippie-ish, but there's a lot of power in being able to to connect. And it doesn't matter if you're connecting with your daughter or a CNA or a stranger. Just being able to share will have a really significant impact in how you feel and how you function on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so quick recap. Make sure you have open body language, even tone. Remember to not go into a conversation like this looking for an end result. Focus on the environment, use objects, use their environment, and go with the flow. Have fun and see where the conversation takes you. You never know what you might learn about the people that you care about just by being curious. I hope that helps. Thank you guys so much for listening, and best wishes for the new year.